All right, welcome back into episode 12 of The Pit, your Georgia regional sports show. I'm Drew Pavon here in WTVM in Columbus, Georgia, joined by Aaron Mukes of WALB down in Albany. Of course, always impressive Ryan Kelly, WCTV down in Tallahassee, Florida. We got you covered with all the South region of Georgia today, but we're going to start off. It was a big weekend for spring games across college football, and of course, we're Georgia Sports Regional Show, so we got to talk dogs. A big day for G-Day. A lot of injuries for the dogs, but a lot of things stuck out. Aaron, I'll start with you. Just, they were able to stream the game finally. One of these college games were actually able to have it. What'd you see? What really stuck out to you with G-Day?
I think first, it's just a different feel being a Georgia Bulldog, watching them play. This is a team that we're as we get more removed from the national championship teams, a lot of younger guys, new faces, less experience. And I think Coach Smart talks a lot about this being a brand new team, young guys. And now here we are. For me personally, what stood out the most is it was really good to see some of our guys here in South Georgia get some opportunities there. Jeremy Bell, 5 catches in the game. Todd Robinson had a pick. He played at Valdosta. So it's always fun to watch those local guys get an opportunity to kind of make their mark, especially guys that have had to earn their keep and sit the bench a little bit their first year, a red shirt, and now they're getting opportunities here in the spring to maybe make a name for themselves and have a role come late in the fall. But really, I always find spring games interesting because you don't really know. You don't get a lot of information from a spring game. You just want to see guys come out, work, see where the team's at, and then some of those position battles, how are they going to kind of play out? So for me, it was just more of a feeling out period. But this is the first time since I've been here where I look at the team and I'm like, it kind of looks unfamiliar. And there's not a lot of talk about guys that have done it before. I remember I first got here and it was the Nakobe Deans of the world, right? The great Georgia defense. Now as we get removed from that, it's a lot of new faces, and Coach Smart has to figure this team out and see where we go. But it was a lot of fun to watch. And then again, just watching some of the local kids do their thing was really, really special as well.
Ryan, what'd you think?
I'm so happy that Aaron brought up Todd Robinson, because if you're not from this neck of the woods in the Peach State, I got to tell you, that is a special, special athlete. Kirby Smart and the Dogs, very, very excited to have him, and they should be. He was so dynamic for the Valdosta Wildcats. And, of course, a winning pedigree coming from the winningest program in high school football history. And this Georgia team certainly seems to have some of that pedigree. They certainly seem to have some of that what for. Like Aaron said, a lot of these faces are new, but Kirby Smart made a point of saying after G-Day that he really liked the way that they worked all spring long. Said 14 of the 15 practices he wouldn't have back for anything. You heard the players echo that after the game, saying that this team is competitive. They like to get after it. Last week we talked about we want to know who's catching the football, and we still don't know who those go-to guys are per se, because you look at the box scores for both Team Red and Team Black, it seemed like everybody caught themselves a pass. It was like, Oprah, look under your chairs. You get a pass. You get a pass. You get a pass. But Gunnar Stockton, that's what you want to see. You want to see your quarterback play well. You want to see him play sharp. He did good. Ended up leading a touchdown drive, led a long field goal drive as well. And anytime you see the starting quarterback's team win, like Aaron said, it's a spring game. You can only take so much away. But at the end of the day, you don't want to see your starter struggle. And Stockton certainly didn't do that. Great effort from him. Interested to see what the Dogs look like in fall as they continue to evolve and they continue to get some guys coming in from the portal who weren't in there for spring yet.
Absolutely. Gunnar looked a little bit better. Hearing his post-game sound from over the weekend, he was talking about just keying up on the little things. His footwork was something, just cleaning up the mechanics. And we all know he's going to be the starting quarterback. There's really no competition with that. I think Georgia had 6, maybe 7 different quarterbacks throw a pass in G-Day, which is pretty impressive. Kirby able to get almost everyone in there, like you mentioned, Ryan. It was receivers were catching passes, quarterbacks were in there. So I think it gave a lot of Georgia fans different looks. And I think that's the one good part about spring game is you get these guys who, you followed through high school and you get to see them finally get some reps at Sanford Stadium. So that's always good to see. I think one thing I want to point out is Caden Prothero, the freshman star of the state in high school. He got a good chunk of reps moving to that wide receiver. They played him a lot at slot. I fully expect him, with the injuries they had. I think they had 13 key guys were out for this game. So to see those younger guys trying to get some reps and get in there, Prothero, I think, is going to be a huge weapon for them. If he plays a little bit tight end, if he plays the slot, they can move him outside. He's so versatile because he's about 6'6", 230, 240. Like he's just a big body, but he moves super well. So excited to see. A lot of key injuries. Guys were, just recovering from stuff at the end of the year. Amari Williams is the big one, transfer from Auburn that we got to cover, who I was excited to see in Kirby's defense going into this year. He had a non-contact torn ACL. Kirby really spoke a little bit about it after G-Day, said that there is a possibility he could come back later in the year, but never what you want to see, especially for a key guy that got out of the portal. That seemed to be something that could be a difference maker for the edges on this defensive front. We're going to move over to Georgia Tech. They had a big spring game as well. A lot of new faces, 6 new staffers for the Ramblin' Wreck, new quarterback, new running back, Alberto Mendoza. I was up there on the flats, got to see him firsthand. Really impressed with what he brings to the table. Not as big as his brother, kind of about 6'2", like 230 size, but man, he's got some good touch. And I think what Georgia Tech was missing was that downfield throwing the football, and I think with Mendoza, he really brings that. Ryan, what can fans expect with Tech? Brent Key is an electric coach. I love his style of grit, but some new additions and a new tandem to the backfield with Malachi Hosley and Justice Haynes.
Yeah, and you mentioned 6 new staffers, 2 of which are coordinators, so you're getting a new identity on both sides of the ball, at least in terms of the nuances. Whenever Brent Key is the head coach of a program, they're going to be tough, they're going to be gritty, like you said. But Alberto Mendoza, 12 of 16, 148 yards, a touchdown. He's going to be the big headline coming out of this one. Looks so sharp, looks so good. He's not exactly Fernando, which also means if he's not as big of a frame, he's not exactly Haynes King either. And I get it, it's a spring game. The quarterback's not going to be live. You're not going to run the football. But if I remember correctly, only ran the ball twice in that game, and I don't particularly know if either of those were sacks or all of that. I don't have the box score. I don't have the play-by-play right in front of me. But this is a team that's still going to be tough. They're still going to be gritty. And, you talked about a tight end for the Dogs. How about a tight end for the Jacket? Redshirt freshman Kevin Roche Jr., 6 receptions, 70 yards. Certainly looks like a guy that Georgia Tech may be able to depend on this fall in Atlanta. They were balanced on offense, but still tough. Like I said, 45 passing plays to 40 rushes. You kind of like seeing that balanced identity for Georgia Tech. And yeah, again, you know what you're getting out of a Brent Key team. You know exactly what it's going to look like as far as identity, but those nuances, I'm excited to see how they develop throughout fall camp when Tech finally takes Bobby Dodd Field again coming up.
Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me with the defensive line, you have it up on the graphic right there, that depth on the defensive line, it's a good problem to have. We've seen the football game shift over the years of if you can run 4 new guys out there in and out of the game like that to keep those guys fresh, that's going to be a problem, especially when you get to fourth quarter of games. And we know Brent Key already plays that physical style of football. To have those guys fresh and being able to run a number of guys out there on the defensive line, I think that's special. The running backs are going to be a problem for any team they face. Haynes has always been special. Now you put in Hosley there. The difference for me is going to be, Ryan talked about the running game at quarterback. Like, how do you replace that? And I think when you play 11 on 11 football, it gives you a different element. Is Mendoza going to do some of that? Who knows? But he threw the ball really well, and you have to be excited about that. But Haynes King was a different type of football player. His ability to run the football in the physical style in which he ran because of his size, I thought gave them an added element. How do you replace that, or how do you change from that maybe to throwing the ball a little bit more, maybe some different route concepts to where you're doing it more through the air? I think is going to be the biggest question. But Mendoza was impressive for his first, the first look down there on the flats. And I'm excited for them. They've obviously taken a number of big steps over the years with Brent Key, and I expect them to continue to do so as we head into 2026.
Absolutely, and they start the year with a big game against Colorado at home Thursday night. Deion Sanders rolls back into the A. You just know the flats are going to be bumping for that one, especially on a Thursday night game. Oh, Atlanta's going to be juiced for it. But Mendoza, I think it's kind of a give and take with him at quarterback. It's like you lose that running ability that Haynes King had and brought that different style, that ground and pound, smash mouth football. But you also lost the element of the deep ball that they kind of struggled with throughout the back half of the year, was when teams forced him to throw. He just couldn't deliver. Mendoza can make those throws, and he's got a little speed to him as well. He broke out some runs, but obviously non-contact for the quarterbacks. But he showed off his, kind of ability to step up and just take off. So interesting to see how that's going to roll around with the new group, especially with an offense with Justice Haynes and Malachi Hosley, which I think could be a better 1-2 punch than when they had Jamal Haynes and Hosley last year. But I love I love Brent Key. I love the grit he brings, just smash mouth football. He was pretty juiced about not having a spring game. Before we flip to the NFL draft real quickly, you guys think that spring game should stick around? Ryan, I'll start with you.
It's kind of interesting because I'm standing in a place in Tallahassee, Florida, where the big Power 4 program didn't have a spring game and hasn't for the last 2 years. Florida State said last year it was because of the work going on at Doak Campbell Stadium that they couldn't hold a spring game, but we all kind of knew that that was a little suspect. They'd held one in Orlando before the last time the Doak was under renovation. This year just didn't have one, and head coach Mike Norvell said it was partially because you have 15 practices. That's all you have, especially when you're in a program situation like Florida State, where they're kind of trying to get themselves out of the muck. You have a head coach on the hot seat. You don't want to have that spring game where you let folks in and you let the broadcast stream it or whatever it is, and you feel like you have to be vanilla. You feel like you can't show all your looks. So I am interested to see if more coaches adopt that throughout this. Of course, you don't have that spring, summer portal window to worry about anymore as far as folks trying to scout your guys, but especially in this new age of college football, I've already seen it happen in my own backyard where one of these teams doesn't want to have a spring game. I'm interested to see if a Georgia Tech, if a Georgia, if somebody in the Peach State or even beyond in the ACC and the SEC follow suit. I believe it was also LSU that didn't have a spring game. I could be wrong on that. You can fact check me on that if you want to, if you know. But the one thing is, these are going to be revenue drivers for certain places. For certain places where it's easy for the fan base to get to, everybody's going to pay $10 a pop to get there. Yeah, those places are probably still going to have some sort of spring game in some capacity because it's going to put dollars in the coffers. But for places like Florida State, where you've got the Tallahassee crowd, but your largest metros are all 2-3 hours away. Jacksonville's 2.5 hours away. Tampa's 3.5 hours away. Orlando's 4.5 hours away. Pensacola's 3. Panama City's 2. It's going to be difficult for some of those programs to, I think, sometimes have that when they don't have the dollar incentive and when coaches feel like the practice incentive isn't there.
Yeah, I think with the spring portal window not being a thing anymore, I think coaches were a lot less hesitant to, hey, we can have this game. I'm not too worried about guys dipping out and leaving. Mukes, what do you think?
Get rid of them. I'm not a fan of them. I think I like the time to be taken to work with your team, establish what you want to be, establish an identity, and get ready for fall. I just don't think a lot comes from spring games. The coaches are at practice every day. They see these guys working. They know who's supposed to be on the field. You put them in a spring game, your main key players aren't even playing a lot. You get these guys that are getting a little bit of run. I just don't think it's very helpful. Again, me being a former football coach, not at this level, obviously, I just think more work can be done in practice, working on individual things than trying to go out there and showcase to a bunch of fans. I get it for the fans. It's cool to watch. We want things in the off season so we can stay connected. But from a football perspective and the team, I don't really think it has any impact on what's going to happen in the fall. And for that reason, I'm just a fan of getting rid of them.
Yeah, I'm kind of out on spring games right now. Attendance has been low across the country, it seems like, on a majority of spring games, especially in this year, not like it was 2 years ago, and I think maybe COVID had something to do with that. But, we cover Auburn up here as well. It's in our DMA, and, one of the few things or one good idea that Hugh Freeze had was just kind of make it like OTAs in the pros, just kind of let that kind of roll and extend the practices for the guys, but kind of do away with the open scrimmage, kind of setting. Because, spring, you may lose some guys to non-contact injuries. Look at Amari Williams. Push those practices back, give them more options in July and August to get ready for the fall. But speaking of OTAs and the pros, NFL draft week this week, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up as a huge NFL draft fan growing up, just east of New York City. Never got to go, but always watched. I watched the movie Draft Day about 3 times this week, every year since the movie came out, just to get hype for it. A lot of dogs and Yellow Jackets looking to hear their name calls. Obviously, the top of the board right now looks like Monroe Freeling is projected maybe to Detroit, and a lot of the names in that top 20 conversation. But out of the Georgia Tech guys, who do you think is going to be first-round picks? Aaron, I'll start with you.
I think one that I'm really keeping my eye on is CJ Allen. I'm kind of saying that because my Dallas Cowboys need a guy like CJ Allen. So I'm hoping there's an opportunity there. They have 2 first-round draft picks. I can see him maybe going there in that late first round. And if that's something that my Dallas Cowboys can do, I think that's a great pick there. Obviously, the news coming out earlier this week about the Georgia wide receiver getting into some trouble was a little bit disheartening. But I do like Freeling. I do think he's going to be the first one off the board. I just think this is a draft to me that the positions of depth, the outside of edge rusher, are in all positions that aren't usually valued as high in the NFL, which is like safety. You get linebackers, and there's a lot of those guys that's a deep draft class, but the NFL doesn't really value those positions. To me, that is the most intriguing storyline. Running back, linebacker, and safety, how early are those guys going to go? And are we going to see a run on them, or is it going to stay true to what the NFL has been, where it's edge rusher, quarterbacks, DBs, and wide receivers? And I think that's, to me, the biggest thing that I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Non-premium positions, there's some really talented guys, but those premium positions, the top of the draft, always go pretty high when they're deep at the talent position. Ryan, out of this list, who are you looking for maybe as a first-round, second-round guy that could be a sleeper in the NFL?
Andrew, I'm looking at Vontae Mack no matter what. Overall,
Good draft
though, I think all four of these guys can certainly be day one, day two, of course they're going to be day one, day two. They're round one or round two projections. I think all four of them can certainly find homes. But I was actually kind of interested in something that you guys both brought up, because I've heard a lot of folks and I've read a lot of things from the NFL draft picks talking about the idea that there's really only about 15, 16 in those premium position, first round valuation type players. And I'm interested to see for these guys and a whole lot of others how that shuffles the rest of the things out, and what that means for teams like the Falcons, who right now only start in the third round. What that means for a Jacksonville, who doesn't have a day one pick in our neck of the woods. Are these teams going to maybe be a little aggressive, especially if they have draft capital, and work their way back into the first round, see what they can do with the premium positions at, well, for lack of a better word, a premium?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we're running a little short on time. We got to keep this train rolling, but the Falcons do have 5 picks this weekend, and they don't have a pick on day one. So going to be interesting to see what the new regime can do with not a ton of draft capital coming in. So still to come, though, on the pit, we got to talk Hawks. Game 2 tonight against the New York Knicks, and of course we'll talk the red-hot start for the Atlanta Braves, all coming next on the pit. All right, welcome back into the pit. We got to talk Atlanta Pro Sports. The Atlanta Hawks start Game 2 of the NBA playoffs. A tough Game 1 for them up in New York, and they're going for Game 2 tonight. Hopefully they can try to steal one against the New York Knickerbockers. Aaron, I'll start with you. What'd you think of Game 1 for the Hawks?
I don't want to say it was pretty much what I expected, but you gotta realize this is the Hawks team that doesn't have much playoff experience outside of like guys like McCollum, a few guys on the bench that didn't play huge roles when Atlanta had been there before. This is not a team that is really ready for the playoff moment, in my opinion. I don't want to say it's already been a success so far, but I don't think they're out of it by any means. This is a Knicks team that struggled at points throughout the season, specifically stopping other teams. Their defense has taken a step back since losing Tom Thibodeau. But when you got Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and those boys that have done it before, that have made a run in the playoffs, it's going to be tough, especially when you go to a place like Madison Square Garden and you no longer have the MSG killer in Trae Young that people are still talking about. But I thought they played fairly decent. It wasn't like the game got out of hand too much. It was just, you could tell that they are not necessarily the better team. Like, they're going to have to play their best basketball, and the Knicks are going to have to struggle a little bit in order for them to get a win. So again, it's just Game 1. So when you look at a playoff series, a lot of people will react to Game 1 and see what happened, but the Knicks were supposed to win. I think Atlanta still has an opportunity. If they go into New York tonight and split the series, then they have the home court advantage. So I think you just bounce back. I think they do need it. Their offense got a little stagnant at times, which was weird, because this is a team that's done a really good job of facilitating and moving the basketball. At times they got a little stagnant. I thought Jalen Johnson played okay, but not his best basketball, and I would like to see him get even more involved in becoming a playmaker. But other than that, again, to me, it was more status quo for the Hawks. It's going to be a tough round 1 for them to get a win, and I think if they come out of the series with 2 wins, I think that's a plus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a Knicks team, and you mentioned the Garden. That's a tough place to win, especially in the playoffs. Being a New York guy, I'm not a Knicks fan, so I'd like to see the Hawks get a win. My Uber driver on Saturday was watching the game while driving, so I left him a 5-star rating because I'm a sports guy, and he was like, "Do you mind if I watch this?" Ryan, what do you think of Game 1? Do the Hawks got a chance tonight in Game 2?
Well, I feel like the Hawks kind of have to get this one tonight if they want to even make this series interesting. You got to take one of these first 2 in the Garden. But when you look back at Game 1, New York's dynamic duo was just slightly better. I mean, you look at Brunson, ended up with 28. Karl Anthony Towns with 25 has 53 points compared to 49 points for McCollum and Johnson. And I wasn't a great mathematician in high school, but I can tell you that's a 4-point swing in what was pretty much a game that had margins that were pretty slim. So overall, you can't let both of those guys beat you. You've got to be able to shut one down at least somewhat, in some way. But again, tonight, the big circled one, you got to take one of these games in the Garden before you go back home to Atlanta. Hopefully you can make some hay with home court. But overall, yeah, regardless of what happens, we've talked about this last few weeks, this is kind of house money for the Hawks, but at the end of the day, you don't want the broom either. So go out, have a good showing, see if you can't steal one of these in New York and make this thing interesting, 6-7 type game affair.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get one, and I think Hawks fans are kind of happy they're just not in the play-in tournament, which is a huge relief, especially in the A. But you get 2 home playoff games guaranteed, and we know State Farm Arena is going to be jumping. Hey, we're going to switch real quick to another pro team in the A who's having themselves quite the start in March and April. The Atlanta Braves are rocking and rolling right now. It helps that the Mets are on a 11-game losing streak, but they go into Philly over the weekend. They get a 3-game sweep over the Phils. First time they did so at Citizens Bank Park since 2016, if you could believe it. But guys, what have you thought of the Braves so far? Ryan, I'll start with you.
You know, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned a 5-game winning streak. You get a sweep over the Phillies. You haven't lost since last Monday when the Fish got you. And yeah, if you'd have told me right now that Miami and Washington are above Philly and New York in the NL East standings, that's I would have questioned your sanity. I about said something that maybe would have been FCC appropriate. We're on the internet, who cares? But at the end of the day, you take a look at it. Really cool last week. Did want to mention something that we wanted to make sure we got on air. Chris Sale passing Tom Glavine at all-time strikeouts, doing it in her Braves uniform. That is really, really cool. But you mentioned it, the Mets have lost 11 straight. I'm not so sure that what's happening with the Fish or the Nats is sustainable. We'll find out over the next month or so. But listen, the Mets are still plenty talented. The Phils are still plenty talented. As we've said over these last few weeks, just make hay while you can. Keep this hot streak going because you're going to go cold eventually. It's a 162-game season. If you can build yourself up enough cushion while you're not at 100%, if you don't have to worry about it all that much when you get all your guys back around the All-Star break, you'll be sitting pretty good here in the NL East, and you'll have playoff baseball again in the ATL.
Absolutely. Braves play the Nats tonight. They stay on the road, and we'll head to Washington to play them. But hey, Aaron, what about you? What have you thought the Braves start to the year?
I mean, you can't ask for anything better, specifically coming off of last year, the way they started. To Ryan's point of extending that out, if you can get off to a hot start, it also allows you to take your time with guys like Spencer Strider coming back or Murphy coming back. You don't have to rush those guys back because you feel like you need to get wins in the win column. And specifically, they're doing this, and Ronald Acuna Jr. has not hit the ball very well. Austin Riley struggled early on. So they're doing this with their lineup, not even really playing to its full potential. You have to imagine that those guys are going to get their bats going, and it's going to be even better. And then when you can get innings like you're getting from Bryce Elder, with that rotation and the question marks that were like who's going to be that 4th and 5th guy, and Bryce Elder pitching the way he's been pitching, I think if you're an Atlanta Braves fan, you're sitting real pretty right now, and you have to be excited for what this team is capable of, specifically in a National League that everybody's already looking at. You know, the Dodgers being the team, which they should be, that you're going to end up having to go through anyways. I think this sets up well for the Braves, specifically as you head into the summer months.
Absolutely. This rotation had so many concerns going in, and they have exceeded expectations by far. Chris Sale, Dylan, but you get like a Holmes and an Elder who have pitched fairly well and just doing their job when they needed to has proved to be why the Braves can be a playoff team. And like we said, it's 162 games in this year, and getting that early jump on the year, because it feels like the Mets go through this every year where they go like a 10-game losing streak, and then they just somehow flip a switch around the halfway point and are somehow still in the playoffs. But still a lot to look forward to. Catch the draft this week. We'll have your recap next week on Monday, and of course, hopefully the Braves can stay hot, and hopefully we're still talking Hawks basketball by the next episode of The Pit. But hey, that's all for this episode 12 of The Pit. Thanks for joining us, and tune back in next week.